So, as we begin, I note that one news source that has covered the Hbomberguy James Somerton situation after another has been amending their coverage to say that James Somerton is now alive, and they are basing that on Kat Lowe's Reddit post where she said that she heard that James Somerton is alive. And it's kind of amazing to me. This is not in the realm of conspiracy theory at all to say that that does not, Kat Lowe typing that she heard James Somerton is alive does not prove that James Somerton is alive. Now, she may be telling the truth. She could, in fact, have heard that James Somerton is alive, in which case it would be great to hear more substantiation of where she's, where she got this information, who she spoke to, that sort of thing. But again, ultimately, it will only be when James Somerton resurfaces publicly and puts himself on camera that we will know that he's alive and well. And the "and well" part certainly comes with a great deal of skepticism, even if he is alive. But at this point, there is no reason to believe that Kat has any more knowledge of the current whereabouts of James Somerton than she does the current whereabouts of D.B. Cooper. Anyway, I wanted to, I've got more stuff coming down the pipe on this. The one YouTuber who's a regular commenter on my channel, who has a channel in his own right, the Jim Jesus, did a nice podcast recently, which I'm actually going to do a video talking about that and summarizing that fairly soon. I'm also working on doing an interview with somebody that approached me that presented themselves as one of Hbomberguy's victims from his trolling and harassment campaigns. So I'm looking forward to all of that. But right now, I wanted to get into, kind of some interesting minutia, because it's interesting. I looked at the Hbomberguy Reddit thread. Somebody said, it's funny how they downplay things. Somebody said on my comments thread, said, well, I checked the Hbomberguy Reddit and Jordan's only mentioned 4 times. No, sir. There are 4 threads about me, all of which have hundreds and hundreds of comments. There's a big difference. Okay. Makes me wonder if you know the difference between sets and reps when you go to the gym, if you go to the gym. But anyway, as I was looking through all of that, I saw something interesting that I wanted to comment on. Of course, there was a whole thing of people talking about one thing in particular, which is, why do I have a skull on my shelf? Speculating about all the silly, funny things that this skull could represent. So I wanted to give you a little explanation of what this one in particular represents. This is a sugar skull or a calavera from the Dia de Muertos celebration in Mexico. It's not from there, it's just something I picked up at the local store. But it is a representation of that. Day of the Dead, Dia de Muertos, is something that fascinates me. I love the idea of humanizing death in that way, and having a holiday devoted to celebrating it as something beautiful and communing with ancestral spirits and that sort of thing. And I think it is a cultural practice that we have lost we've lost in the West. Our concept of death is kind of, I think, at the level of like Ingmar Bergman in The Seventh Seal, where it's this ominous specter coming to take you away and that sort of thing. And that seems to sadly be true even in a lot of Christian communities and that sort of thing. So I love the idea of Dia de Muertos, and I know I'm probably getting the Spanish wrong, please forgive me, but Day of the Dead is fascinating to me. And it's been it's had a lot of, generated a lot of interesting artistic creations of different types through the years. Yes, I saw the part of that Coco, I think it's called Coco movie. I saw part of that. That was not one of my more interesting the more interesting incarnations of what I'm talking about. But things like the computer game Grim Fandango, if you've ever played that, is absolutely phenomenal, and it deals with Day of the Dead and everything. So that is what this skull represents, and it's I say that because it's funny. As much as the Hbomberguy contingent prides themselves on being this diverse multicultural realm and everything, every single one of you that speculated on what this skull is supposed to represent have failed to miss the mark dramatically, even though it's sitting there right in front of you, and even though Dia de Muertos is a fairly commonly known holiday. I mean, it's just incredible to me. Well, what was funny was one person said something like, "LOL, I bet he's got even more skulls on that shelf that we can't even see." And you would be right. This skull has no significant meaning whatsoever. I got it about probably 15 years ago because I thought it looked cool. It does have these neat little Celtic designs on it. This one I got at a store in Little Five Points in Atlanta called Junkman's Daughter. And if you've ever been to Little Five Points, if you've ever been to Atlanta, Little Five Points is like our kind of like our Greenwich Village, if you will. And so there's a lot of great, artsy kind of shops down there and everything. I used to think Little Five Points was just the end-all, be-all. Now I barely notice it at all, getting old and that kind of thing. But anyway, I got this at Junkman's Daughter, and it's neat because it has this it's just a paperweight, but it has this little compartment in it that I used to fill up with guitar picks. I can't do that anymore because I've discovered that, cats like to knock this thing off of shelves, which is why it's missing that chip in the front. But anyway, so yeah, that's my other skull. I'm not aware of, wait, I almost forgot. And I have still a third skull. This is it was a little jar that was supposed to, it was supposed to be, this is just like a Halloween novelty thing. It was a jar, but it was, I was using it as a pencil cup. In fact, I might start using it as a pencil cup again. But yeah, wow, I almost forgot the third skull that I have. Anyway, so there's no political significance to any of them. There's no great, it's not meant to represent anything, and certainly I don't think anything terribly contemptible. They're just little things that I like, figurines that I like, and I think skulls, frankly, I'm just like that Edgar Allan Poe type of Lovecraft, to H.P. Lovecraft type of person that, revels in the macabre. And I know when I say that I'm that H.P. Lovecraft kind of person, you're probably going to jump on the fact that H.P. Lovecraft was a damnable racist and try to tie that into me. I know, to make a joke like that. And that was getting into what I wanted to talk to you about, you on the Hbomberguy subreddit, what I wanted to talk to you about, because that's something that Harris has taught you to do. And I was chatting about this with somebody the other day, that way of attacking people, of demoralizing people by kind of stripping down everything about them, making everything about them, just creating an aura of contempt and kind of pathetic contempt around them, is one of the techniques that the true believers, if you will, of the, kind of the Marxist far left that Harris ascribes to and everything, that's one of the techniques that they'll use. Now, it's one of the techniques that extremists of any stripe will use. You see, for example, Scientologists, when the Scientologists that go out and confront people who are challenging them, and they have that ability to start picking people apart very quickly, they've been trained to do that. And it's something that extremists are trained to do. And I would like to think that most of you are not extremists like that. Most of you are probably just decent, middle-of-the-road people. And indeed, I've heard from a lot of decent, middle-of-the-road people in Harris's camp that have reached out and expressed agreement with their concern that, the new revelations about his background with online abuse and harassment and everything certainly do deserve some discussion and that sort of thing. Picking people apart like that over minutia, though, that's something that is meant to that they are that is a very specific technique, and it's a technique that he does extremely well. Ripping people apart and making them look pathetic. To give you an idea of him doing that in action, in one of the videos he made about me, he actually makes, before he gets to the meat of any substance of what I actually said, he starts out by making fun of the fact that I have the screensaver on my computer turned on behind me in the video. He makes fun of that. He makes fun of the fact that he mocks the fact that the documentary test footage I shot had B-roll in it. B-roll being what you cut away to while as a visual overlay for the person who's talking, so you're not just looking at them the whole time. Having B-roll in a documentary is a good thing. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing funny or pathetic or contemptible about the fact that my screensaver was running behind me on my computer. In fact, the same screensaver is running right now. I mean, there's nothing damnable or funny or pathetic or contemptible about that. Yet he primes people, he revs them up to find every single thing about a person pathetic and funny. And that is that toxic influence that he has on you, his viewership. That is what he's operating from, and he knows what he's doing. And it's like, as I sit here, the long-term effect that had on me was like, literally, when all of these decorations, it's kind of like, okay, here's Bob Bomb from Super Mario. Is this pathetic? I don't know. Is this funny? Is this pathetic? Because Mr. Unflappable Bomberguy there just finds everything about me pathetically hilarious and funny in this way that just really burns into your soul. Everything about you. It's like, okay, I've got Notorious B.I.G. here. I'm only a moderate fan of Notorious B.I.G., but I do just think this is one of the coolest looking pops ever made. So, is there something about that that's funny and contemptible? I'm a ginormous fan of Jimi Hendrix. Is there something pathetic and funny about that? And that it goes on from there. And as I was looking through those comments, one person said something that was really odd to me, or really interesting to me. They said, "Oh my God, I just found out that Jordan Owen loves Captain Beefheart, Frank Zappa, and The Residents, and I have to make peace with the fact that this I can't deal with that. I can't handle that." And another person commented and said, "Well, sometimes horrible people like good stuff." And that really struck me because, first of all, if it makes you feel any better, while I appreciate the artistry and the creativity behind what Captain Beefheart did, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan. I don't listen to him very often, and I really could probably not, I don't think I could hum you one bar of one song, but I do appreciate what he did, especially on Trout Mask Replica. So maybe I'll give that one back to you if we can't share interests like this. But Frank Zappa and The Residents, yeah, two of my all-time favorites. Overnight Sensation is my favorite Frank Zappa album. Followed up by You Are What You Is, and then The Residents, my favorite Residents album. It's a close tie between Demons Dance Alone and Animal Lover, with Wormwood close behind. But anyway, so that whole window of time between Freak Show and Animal Lover, Freak Show and Tweedles really is kind of my favorite era. But anyway, it's funny to me. One, that you are funny meaning odd and perplexing. One, that you would have such a huge problem with someone you don't liking the same stuff as you. But that thing about someone calling me a horrible person really stuck with me. Because here's the thing, if I knew, I don't know you, the faceless person who posted that, obviously I don't know what all music you're into and that kind of thing. But what's interesting to me is when I hear something like that, to use Harris Harry as an example, someone I think is absolutely despicable. What have found that we have common interests and commonalities of interest and that sort of thing, that has actually made me more hopeful for him. It's made me more hopeful that he has this appreciation for something. If he can appreciate these things in the manner that I do, where these creative works where they speak to the soul and stuff like that, if he can appreciate that, then maybe there's some commonality between us after all. Maybe it's not hopeless. And if I met you in person, you who made that comment, I feel quite certain that you and I would start talking about Frank Zappa and the Residents and forget very quickly about our wider differences. And I really don't think our differences are that wide. And it is kind of amazing to me. And by the way, I wanted to get more into the horrible person thing because it's especially galling. First of all, a lot of that is probably based on what you think my politics are, which is based on what Harris has portrayed my politics to be, which is grossly, grossly, grossly inaccurate to what they actually are. And if I walked you through everything I believe, we would probably agree on more stuff than we disagree on. But anyway, the other thing that stands out in my mind, and I want to talk about this more, is I want to go back to the thing that I'm accused of doing that makes me such a horrible human being. And that is that I made a roughly 3 hour documentary video about a fellow YouTuber I didn't like, accusing them of ethical malfeasance and a lack of academic professionalism, if you want to put it that way. And when that thing came out, it was laughed out of the room almost immediately and forgotten about, as was I, kicked to the curb. And that brought me to a point where I thought I'll give you the root basis of what I went back to as I thought about all of that, and not only the failure of that, but the way that Harris continued to harass me and drag me through the mud about it long after it was over, long after I had waved my white flag. I thought about that, and I'll tell you, all my life I have been very much on the run from what I thought was what I think deep down kind of intuitively knew was a certainty about myself that I didn't want to acknowledge and I didn't want to deal with, and that is that I had a very grandiose vision for myself and my life that I was grossly unprepared to realize, inequipped to realize. I didn't have what I needed, the skills or the competence that I needed to realize the great grand vision I had for myself and that sort of thing. And I knew that was true on some, growing up as a kid, on some like quiet, intuitive level, the still small voice, as we say. I was aware of that on some level, but I very arrogantly and defiantly refused to acknowledge it or make peace with it. And one of the reasons I didn't do that was because I And I realize now I don't want to, I'm not trying to offload this onto me being autistic or something like this, but there was a component of that, which was I did not make a lot of the criticism that I was getting from people was criticism that they were, even important people in my life that I should have been listening to, was things that were said in frustration. They would say them in anger and frustration and irritability because they were put out with me and put out with dealing with me, and my inability to understand things that were not that should have been intuitively obvious to other people. And so consequently I had this very defiant attitude. But rather than trying to self-reflect and look at myself and say, well, I have these barriers and these limitations that I need to seriously reckon with, and what can I do with what I've got, rather than try to seriously evaluate myself, my attitude was to be endlessly defiant to that, and just pursue my vision, damn what anybody else said about it, and fuck anybody else. And that's why, although I do still agree with her on some things and not others, but that's one of the reasons I deep dived on Ayn Rand in my 20s, because I was, it provided me with a framework where I could view myself as Howard Rourke or John Galt or something like that, and everybody that didn't share my grand vision and everything was just a collectivist that was trying to drag me down and that sort of thing. And so I have this history of kind of defiantly sallying forth into battles that I'm completely unprepared to fight, falling flat on my face, getting laughed at, and assuming that everyone who's laughing at me just can't appreciate my genius, and going on and sallying forth again. And when that documentary blew up in my face and I hit rock bottom, I had to take a real long time to think about myself and fundamentally who I was, and confront some things within myself that I did not like. And in this way, and don't think for a minute that this justifies Harris's behavior at all, but in a way, that massive failure was a blessing in disguise, because it got me to kind of do a reality check on myself and start working, pursuing the things I want to pursue, but pursuing them within a framework of reality, and kind of doing what I can with what's available to me and things like that. And with a requisite amount of self-awareness and humility. And when you finally have that requisite amount of self-awareness and humility, people are actually less likely to be put out with you and angry with you when you're having trouble with something, because you don't seem like some kind of arrogant, defiant asshole. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, the thing is, that was the journey. That was the beginning of the personal journey that I went on. And I realized, and this was especially in 2017 when I came back to Christ, I realized I was going to have to go on a real deep dive of thinking about how my actions could have reasonably harmed people. Now, there are people who, after great consideration, that I've challenged, who, after great consideration and thinking about it for a long time, I would say, no, I was not wrong to challenge that person's ideas or whatever like that. And certainly challenging ideas in and of themselves is not the issue. It's the greater effect, and it's the way our actions affect the person on a grander scale and that sort of thing. But it was a very uncomfortable, when I first asked God, I said, talk to me, show me where I need to go to atone and to make amends. And that documentary was, of course, the first thing that came to mind. And I had to wrestle with that for a long time before I was ready to talk about it. But I had to, I started listening to anyone who would talk to me about it, people from the other side that would talk to me. And what's amazing is so many people from the other side were actually very supportive once they saw my actual humanity, not the badass shit kicker persona I was trying to present to the world, but my actual humanity. One person that was helpful years ago in kind of getting me to do an about face. Obviously, I'm not some far left liberal. I'm not a raging conservative either. I'm a left leaning libertarian, as I say. But as far as getting me to do an about face on my personal toxicity, one person that really helped a lot was Dan Olson, Foldable Human. We talked privately a few times, and he was actually very helpful in a lot of ways. And he said, I don't think I'm betraying confidence by saying this, but he said, Jordan, I think people on our side, you seem like a pretty decent person. You've just gotten involved with some shitty people. And I thought about that, and I said, he's right. He was right about that. And I was in a bad situation that I needed to get out of. And that was the thing I had to reckon with, is people, as the documentary, remember, the documentary was laughed out of the room and ignored, and very quickly kicked to the curb. But I presented to people, I said, like, well, what is it that I still need to reckon with, as far as, like, this thing was forgotten about, so what are people still upset about? What are they still angry about? And what people presented to me was, well, you have to think about, if that thing had been successful, it could have radicalized people. It could have increased the level of harassment around the targets of your documentary. And I'm very intentionally not saying their names. So everybody who is in the know about this already knows what I'm talking about. I'm intentionally not saying their names so as to not further bolster potential harassment, which, by the way, to the people who already know who I'm talking about, a recent thing I wanted to address: taking pictures of private photos of somebody's birthday party, and tweeting about them to make fun of them, is particularly low, even if you don't agree with their ideas. My God, that's just, no. I don't care how funny you think it is. But anyway, that it could have increased that, that it could have potentially taint a lot of people's careers, that sort of thing. And the thing is, I really sat with that for a long time, and I really, invited, I think when you're on the spectrum, you have to kind of consciously invite empathy. Like, you have to, like, say, okay, I need you tell your brain, okay, I need to kind of meditate on the reality of how this could have affected somebody, because it's not an automatic thing. It's not a sociopathic lack of empathy where they're incapable of it. It's just like, you have to kind of put yourself in that person's shoes. And I thought about it, and I'm not going to lie to you, I had nightmares nightmares thinking about the effect that I could have had on the targets of my documentary, like the effect that they could have had, and I could have had on them, and like what it must have been like to be targeted with that. I had actual nightmares about that. And I could go through in that documentary and break down, like, things where it's like, well, I still think this is a reasonable criticism. This was completely unreasonable, that sort of thing. But on the whole premise and the whole idea, above and beyond, specific arguments that might still be valid and that kind of thing, the whole premise was loathsome and awful. And I sat with that for a long time. And so, why am I telling you all of this? Well, because, quite frankly, and this is where, as I've hopefully tried to offer some degree of an olive branch in talking about my interests and our common interests and that kind of thing, this is where I'd like you to sit with one particular observation. That thing about me being a horrible human being. The reason you hold that is because of what could have happened. I failed at what I was hoping to accomplish, and thank God that I did. But I failed at what I was hoping to accomplish. And yet I am still expected to be on the hook for what could have happened. And that's not true of everybody. I know most people kind of realize, well, it's been a decade and it's time to move on. But for people like that, the person who called me horrible, you expect me to be on the hook forever for what could have happened. Now I want you to stop and think about something. Harry, whatever he's supposed to be called, Harry accomplished what, in essence, what I set out to do. Let's see. Epic 3 hour some odd video uh, about a controversial topic. Check. About a controversial public figure who's already been subjected to extraordinary public criticism and scrutiny. Check. But then, and taking that person to task for perceived ethical malfeasance and poor scholarship. Check. Check, check. And I would say, by the way, accurately taking that person to task for poor scholarship and ethical malfeasance. But what did it do? What was the accomplishment? Well, we know that that person was, we know that the person, James Somerton in this case, well, it tanked his career. His career's done. It's over. And it pushed him to self-harm and hospitalization. And we're now possibly confronting the idea that he may have committed suicide, although I agree that with each passing day that we don't get confirmation, it seems less likely that anything that he's suffering. He's physically harmed. He's physically harmed. My best guess is he's probably in, at this point, it's most likely he's probably in some kind of psychiatric hold or something like that. But anyway, I just want you to stop and think, though. Imagine if I had succeeded with my documentary. I know that you've certainly given that a lot of thought. I would have accomplished the same thing that Harris has now accomplished, tanking the career of a YouTuber I didn't like, increasing the level of harassment and public scrutiny around them. And I want you to think, what would your reaction be? And I realize this is one of those, face-to-face with our, kind of face-to-face with the reality implications of what we're doing here, things that are very uncomfortable. So I understand if this upsets you, and, we're dealing with a lot of upsetting stuff right now, but I want you to confront it. What if one of the targets of my documentary had gone public saying that as a result of that documentary, they had attempted to self-harm and had been hospitalized for attempted self-harm? Imagine all of the people who did not like that person. You know that all of the people who didn't like that person would get on there with comments and say, LOL, it's a fake apology, trying to solicit or trying to elicit public sympathy. This is all just a narcissist trying to manipulate us, etc., mocking the person, dragging him through the mud. You would know instantly how abhorrent that behavior was, because you would understand that it's the principle that matters. The principle of having that reaction to somebody who is broken down and weeping and crying and confessing all of their, doing their level best, I think, to confess all of their sins and all of their shortfalls to the world. You would understand how depraved and cold-hearted it would be for people to mock and ridicule someone at that point and accuse that person of just doing it to get attention, and accuse them of just attempting suicide to get attention and that sort of thing. You would understand how vile and awful that was. We are flawed and imperfect humans, and this is why I've emphasized that even as we confront the reality of Harry's heinous behavior, he should be extended a level of sympathy and a level of understanding of love the sinner and hate the sin, because he should be granted the opportunity to improve himself that he has never granted to anyone else, even if he has never granted it to anyone else. And so just think about that. And it's embarrassing for me to even bring this subject up. That's actually why there's been about a week's worth of absence in talking about this, because I knew this was the next thing I wanted to talk about. This is not something I enjoy talking about. It's very much something that I would much rather forget. But it's it is it's just the thing that irks me and burns me so much, that Harris literally set out to do and did the same thing that I did. He succeeded at it, and you're calling him some kind of hero and telling the target of his ire to go fuck themselves, basically. And I really honestly don't appreciate the idea that I'm supposed to be on the hook forever for something that failed. Yes, if it had succeeded, I would be dealing with, well, far more horrible ramifications to my character than what I even care to imagine. But you know full well that you are entertaining a double standard here. That, and I know what you're probably going to do. You're probably going to try to prevaricate the issue by saying that, you'll go to something like, well, James, this happened to the target of your documentary, but it didn't happen to James Somerton. They got this type of threat that James Somerton didn't get. Or James Somerton is this type of person and they're that type of person. You'll try to find some you'll try to find some discrepancy between the comparison, some small component of the Venn diagram that doesn't fully overlap, and try to say that for that reason, for that reason, it is not hypocritical for you to feel one way about one thing and another way about another. Like I said before, I don't know if you watched my last video about Candace Owens leaving the Daily Wire, but I pointed out in there that there's a rabbi. I think it's pronounced Boutique or Boutique. I had not seen the name until I read it in an article just recently. But I don't know if I'm saying it right, but he had talked about how Candace's tweeting about him had increased the level of harassment that he was getting. And I think you totally understand when someone loathsome like Candace Owens is posting horrible things about somebody, and then the level of harassment around that person spikes. You understand in that context how there is a direct one-to-one correlation between what's happening there. So I understand. I think you understand. I think you are totally capable of understanding what's gone wrong here, of Harris's actions, how Harris's actions have provoked these extraordinarily negative harassment and response that James Somerton got. And no, hiding behind the thing of, well, all Harris did was blank, doesn't hold any water. I've been watching that video. He went way above and beyond what is acceptable in terms of mockery and ridicule, and digging into the personal minutia of all of the people he was talking about, like with the, like what he did with me with ripping into the screensaver that I have. That's what he does. He gets you thinking in that realm where you're just going to be constantly mocking and ridiculing people over irrelevant minutia. You know full well that the mockery and the ridicule that he puts forth with that scathing burn, that's motivating people. That is motivating people to go further harass James Somerton. And no, putting a 7-second blink and you miss it disclaimer somewhere in the middle of a 3-hour plus video does not ameliorate, or does not indemnify him against responsibility. That's bullshit. Anyway, to the person who just can't seem to reconcile the fact that I have good taste in music with the fact that we have different political beliefs, maybe, just maybe, to you, and I don't think anyone else in this discussion is going to be able to do this, but maybe to just you, maybe you could stop and think, hey, maybe I have a bridge with this person. Maybe I can find some humanity, open myself up to some humanity in this person. And I say that for no other reason than that, honestly, if I'm being totally honest, it hurts me to have so many people hate my guts. It really does. And I realize that I invite more of that criticism by talking about this and, basically getting up here and saying, ye hypocrites, when I talk about, you condemn one set of actions from one person and then or essentially the same set of actions you champion when it's done by someone you like and that kind of thing. I get that. And like I said, there's this very strong part of me that wants the past to remain buried. That's why I had to sit with this for a while before I posted about it. I am not proud of the personae that I maintained over a decade ago on YouTube, and it haunts me. And if it did not haunt me, I would probably not give a shit about any of this. But I just can't sit with the rank hypocrisy of what Harris is doing here. Anyway, so to you out there who are the Hbomberguy fans, it's weird, but I'm not kidding when I say I wish we could be friends. As much as don't get me wrong, there are the Hbomberguy true believers, the people that will always be on the attack for him, and the people that will always be queuing up to just hit you with the most belittling little insults they possibly can to tear you down, because that's how Hbomberguy has taught them to deal with people they don't like and don't agree with. But I'm really to just the mainstream viewers who like his video essays and everything. I assure you, we would be great friends if we actually knew each other. And the video, the documentary project that I was trying to make and could not make because my reputation was shot, my second documentary that would have been about Sierra Online, I couldn't make that because there was too much ill will. I mean, I just was not going to be able to generate the positive mainstream interest that I would need to support something like that, because I had generated too much ill will, and that was my fault. And I packed up shop and announced that it was over and done, and I admitted defeat and moved on. And then weeks after that, Harris came after me and picked everything back up again. But that documentary, the Sierra movie, one of the motivating factors that I had in making it, or wanting to make it, was that it could be something where the last one had been divisive. This could be something that we could all enjoy together. It could be bonding over something, a shared interest, something we all liked and something we all appreciated together. And I close with that observation because hopefully I would hope that you realize that at the end of the day, this should all be about celebration of things that we love and things we enjoy together. And it was really tough for me in that time of very, very dark self-reflection that I'm not through with 10 years later. I'm still in the midst of that. I had this feeling like when I looked into this fundamentally shitty part of my nature that I had to reckon with, I felt like I didn't deserve those things anymore. I felt like, all of the games that people like Harris have talked about, things like Myst and that sort of thing, and I know everyone's says his Myst video is good. Believe it or not, for all of my contempt of Harris, I'm actually interested in that video because he does do good videos, and I'm interested in hearing what he has to say. But things like that, I felt like I didn't deserve to be a part of it anymore. And, I didn't deserve to be a part of it, and like I didn't deserve to be a part of the fandom. And it became really difficult for me to enjoy a lot of these things that I loved, a lot of the retro games, especially, that we talk about. And I've been able to pull through it. By the way, I've talked about my recent forays into retro gaming. Now I'm playing Spiritual Warfare. If you remember the Wisdom Tree Christian game from back in the day, it's actually not bad. It's kind of a Christian reskin of Zelda, if you will. But anyway, it was really tough for me. And I just wish we could realize that it's okay for us to share these things together. You can be a Marxist left-winger, and I can be a socially liberal, fiscally conservative libertarian, and we can still think Space Quest is an amazing game. We can still think Return to Zork is an amazing game. We can still think Myst is an amazing game. We have this world that we can share and enjoy together, and that should be what brings us together. I'm not asking you to check your beliefs or your politics at the door for that. So I don't think I should have to appreciate that, and I don't think I should have to check mine either. You know, I am a professional musician. I have colleagues in the local music scene that run the gamut from far left to, I don't want to say far right because that implies like fascism, Nazism. I don't have anyone in that contingent, but, you know, to the far further reaches of GOP conservative all the way up to, you know, liberal and far left and all that. And we come together on music, and that's a beautiful thing. And I wish we could have more of that. And that's what's just been on my mind, why I decided to respond to these comments, especially the comment about Zappa and the residents and all of that. Because I'm not doing this with some nefarious motivation. There's not some underhanded thing here. It really does just hurt me that there's this much division. And honestly, I do think Harris has a lot to answer for being one of those dividers when he could go so far to be a uniter. And anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it. Take care.